It always reminds me when I'm making pie dough, like on X2, the police has got like the X-Men surrounded. He's like ready to show off his powers. And he does this like line, you know those mutants they've been talking about in the TV? And he lights his Zippo and he's like, I'm the worst one. And he just like scorches an entire patrol car, whatever. I love that guy. I wanted to be him. I wanted to dress like him. Anyway, I digress. Hot hands, pie dough. Don't melt your butter. Hey everyone, welcome back to the kitchen. My name is Francisco and I am very excited because today we're going to be making summer pie. I really like the sort of the dynamic that happens in the warm months. If you are like me and you live sort of in the Northeast, you know that, we cherish these days. It's a great opportunity to throw on some shorts, throw on a crisp shirt, go to the farmer's market, not really knowing what you're going to find, and then just getting what is clearly delicious and bountiful, and then just decide to cook with that. I want to start talking a little bit about the crust, the step that intimidates a lot of people, especially people that have never baked a pie before in their lives. Pie has been mystified a little bit. There is a particular word that has become my absolute biggest pet peeve in the world just because of how much this word has been like pornified. And that word is flaky. To anyone here that has never made pie before and has no idea of what I'm talking about, I'm going to briefly explain. So pie crust follows a kind of process that is called lamination, which is essentially folding the dough in a way that has pieces of dough, hydrated flour, and cold pieces of butter. So when you have a lamination process and you press them all together, what happens with that is that once they are in the oven, that cold butter is going to cook, it's going to turn into steam, and the steam is going to try and escape. So it's going to sort of push the layer of dough that is above it, and therefore it's going to create layers. People get obsessed with this, like to a point where I feel like they've lost the plot. Like it's too much. At the end of the day, if you take anything away from this video, especially newbies, if you for whatever reason fail to make the lamination process, you're combining flour and butter and salt and sugar, and you're baking that, it's gonna taste delicious. And you're gonna present it to your friends with a beautiful fresh fruit filling. If your friends point out that your crust isn't flaky, then I'm sorry, but I think that you don't need better pie crust. You need better friends. You just made them pie. Are you kidding me? Enough of this flaky madness, okay? We're gonna make crust, it's gonna be delicious. Flour, butter, salt, sugar, and water. That's it. Having ice water is really important because we don't want our butter to melt, because we want the lamination, and because we want the flakiness and everything. We want to keep everything sort of as cold as possible. We have our scale, big bowl, going in. If you're gonna make a pie crust, make two. You're already doing the entire thing. It doesn't take longer. 700 grams of all-purpose flour, and I have to season it. My pie crust is well seasoned, okay? I don't want anyone being like, oh my God, that's a lot of salt. Well, it's a lot of flour. It's 700 grams of flour. Maybe flaky as hell, but if it doesn't taste like anything, I don't want it. 1 full tablespoon of salt, 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Now, to my flour, I am going to now add my butter. The moment that your butter is out of the fridge, you want to start working kind of quickly. I'm going to cut them 2 blocks. I am going to kind of just slice it thinly, flat sheets. And then the other 2, I'm going to cut them in different sizes. While I cut these, I'm putting these in the fridge. It is hot outside today. We are at 29 degrees Celsius. I have no idea what that is in Fahrenheit. So for the last 2 butter sticks, I am cutting them lengthwise. I'm gonna put this in the freezer for a little bit. So once we are ready, I am going to be adding my butter into my flour. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my hands to start pinching the butter and flattening it. So first and foremost, I am going to cover all of the butter into the flour, which is gonna make it a lot less sticky. And then using the flour, I'm gonna start pinching and flattening. I'm doing this sort of motion. There are some chefs out there that will use a processor. They will pulse the butter and the flour together. I don't like doing that. I don't know what to tell you. I think that one of the things that I love most about cooking is these moments where you're expected to be using your senses. And I feel like in our daily life, computer life and normal 9 to 5 life, we are so expected to make use of obviously our brains, but our eyes. Like, we're such visual creatures now. Doing this really like forces you to rely on your other senses, locating like the pieces of butter that are larger and maybe flattening them or not. Lovely. It starts to almost like hold together in a weird way, and that's because it's slowly hydrating. Not every piece is flattened, but again, we're gonna work this further later. Stick it in the fridge a little bit, let it cool, and then we'll keep working on it. I'm gonna preheat my oven at 420, and we can start working on our filling. Our fruit is in the fridge, let's bring it. So I am gonna be slicing my peaches. The beautiful thing about this is that if you find maybe peaches that are not at their most beautiful, optimal place, we are going to macerate them, and in the oven, they will release all of their juices. So don't stress if your fruits are not like peak level. Because I also believe that if you find peaches that are their peak level, eat them raw. Respect the fruit, you know? Slicing them kind of like in moon shapes. Yeah, it's kind of like a half moon. Get more fruit because you might eat half of it. And strawberries. I mean, look at this. Spending some time with your fruit and like slicing it and smelling it. You don't have this much fun in the fall. That is a time for somber contemplation. Okay, this looks good. We are going to macerate. Macerate just means tossing it in a little bit of acid and sugar, and essentially that the sugar kind of abrades the fruit and it allows it to start releasing all of its juices. 3 tablespoons of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, otherwise it would just be way too sweet. Apple cider vinegar, about a tablespoon. We really want this acidity. The acidity is going to balance the sweetness. Cool, setting this aside. And now we can continue with our crust. Give it up for chopping board, everyone. She's leaving. Start adding ice water little by little into my bowl. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shake my bowl first. Very scientific, and by that I mean not at all, with how I add my water. Because I really just like using my sight. So adding a little bit of water down there. Especially reaching like the very bottom of the bowl. There we go. And this is doing like half the work for me. It's coming into like these little bowls. So that means that now I can transfer it. As you can see, this is absolutely not a dough. It is a shaggy mess. I have my ice water, and what I'm gonna do is I am going to continue hydrating my dough very, very sparingly. This is, I think, a mistake that many people make because if you've never made pie dough, if you're not an experienced baker and someone tells you to put a dough together, you're probably picturing like, you know, those doughs that are for bread that, you know, they're like manipulating it and stretching it, and like that is not what we're doing with pie dough. Pie dough is going to very, very loosely come together with water, making sure that all that flour that's in the bottom is coming up to the top. And then what I'm doing is that I am sort of pressing it together like so. Part of the beauty and the important part of like making pie dough is using your sight, using your senses. If you press it, does it stay together? It's getting there. Dividing everything by half and then putting it over itself, it's relaxing. I'm gonna do my best to form it into like a rectangle because remember, these are 2 crusts. Cutting this in half, and you can see here are like visible layers. I am forming these 2 pieces into a circle as best I can. We're covering these in plastic wrap. I can't recommend you enough to just do all of this the day before. Please don't make your dough the same day. A fully baked pie will hold really well, either in the fridge or at room temperature. You let it come to room temperature for about 2 hours. The day of, you're done. You don't have to do anything. Please give it up for our fruit filling. Look at that. Look at the amount of juices If I were to put this in my filling, my pie would be incredibly runny. It would be incredibly soupy. So to mitigate that, I'm going to add cornstarch. What this cornstarch does is that it sort of solidifies the juices, and that's what's gonna make the pie really saucy, not soupy. You know what I mean? The last thing that I'm gonna add is a whole vanilla bean. It really just gives a flavor to the filling that you can't replicate. You cut it lengthwise, you hold it by the tail, and with a sharp part of your knife, you slice it, open that slit, and then you press and slide, and all of the interior beans of the vanilla bean are going to release. And we're gonna add the interior of our vanilla bean into our filling. Just give it a good mix just to make sure that it's well sort of distributed and that there are no big lumps of vanilla in like one piece of fruit. So after you put your dough in your freezer, you want to let it, like I said, hydrate for at least 2 hours, 3 hours in the fridge. Although I would really advise to you just make it another day so that you have one that is ready to roll. I did that. I made another one. I made it last week. I had it in my freezer. I had let it thaw in the fridge overnight. Uncover it, sparingly dusting with flour. We want to keep it sort of as cold as humanly possible. Now that it's out of the fridge, it's gonna be very kind of hard, difficult to roll out. So I'm gonna whack it with my rolling pin. And that effectively is going to flatten it. My neighbors love me. All right, I'm just gonna start lightly rolling it out. And as you can see, I'm rolling it and then like turning it pretty often, almost every couple of rolls, just to ensure that nothing is sticking on the bottom. You have these like crevices that start forming. Pinch them together, don't stress, this is part of the process. I am going to grease my pie plate with butter, folding my dough. 1, 2, 3, 4. Putting my pie plate, dropping my dough, and then unfolding. So, again, I don't really want to mess with this too much. What I do not want is for there to be any space between the corners, between the bottom half and the side. So as you can see, I'm not stretching the dough, I'm just letting gravity do its thing. I'm grabbing the overhang and I'm just letting it kind of fall and stick to the side of the pie walls. I am gonna cut the overhang. I'm gonna leave it basically like overhanging because I'm gonna put it in the oven to cook, to fully cook before I add my filling. When this crust hits the oven, it's gonna start shrinking. I'm gonna crimp the dough onto the side just to have it stick, and this is going to give me the best chance of it like not moving around. My pies do not have double crust. I don't believe in double crust pies. I don't think that they do what society has told us that they do. And I don't think you need that much crust. I'm gonna score my crust with a fork. If there were no holes in this crust, the dough would begin to rise and it will lose its shape. I am adding pie weights. I'm using chickpeas, and I use them exclusively for this. My crust is now cooking without the foil, and it's gonna go there for 40 to 45 minutes. So there are chefs that don't do this. There are chefs that they put all the filling in with their raw dough, and they're baking it for like 2.5 hours, sometimes 3. The reason why I don't like putting everything together is because think about a piece of bread. If you wanted to toast a piece of bread and you slather it in milk and then you put it in the toaster, well, first of all, that toaster might kill you. But second, most importantly, that toast would never get crispy because it's wet. If I were to put my raw dough and then I put my wet filling, those juices are gonna come in contact with the dough. And it doesn't matter, in my opinion, if I bake it for 2 or 5 hours, that layer of dough, it will never fully cook. It will never get crispy. Your crust will never have those layers. It will never be flaky because you're not allowing the butter and the dough, that lamination, to do what it's supposed to do, what we want it to do in the oven. So it puffed a little bit. I'm just gonna kind of squish it back down. But it has that like lovely look of like a Ritz cracker, and it smells like a croissant. So now I can add my filling and it's going back in the oven. Wow. And now, the piece of resistance, I'm going to be adding the Parmesan. Parmigiano is something that I think goes beautifully with this. Balances the sweetness of the fruit. It provides like little pockets of salt. It's so good. I can't recommend it enough. I know that maybe it sounds very different, you know, especially if you come from like the tradition of like the American pie that is eaten like warm with ice cream. That's not what I'm going for. I'm not American. I don't have that nostalgia. I didn't grow up with that. So in my head, it is perfectly fine if the pie that you eat is more like at room temperature instead of hot. It has cheese in it, and you eat it with like amaro or a glass of white wine. Back into the oven for maybe an hour. Okay, y'all. Pie's coming out of the oven. She's ready. Oh my god, she's beautiful. You see all of those beautiful juices kind of gathering. That's fine. That's what we want. Here's the thing, and this is why I told you at the beginning that you wanted to bake your pie the day before. I need to let this rest. The quickest I would recommend is 2 hours. If I cut into this pie now and serve a slice, it will completely fall apart. I'm gonna let this baby sit overnight. I'm gonna go to bed. Like, I'm just gonna sort of cover it a little bit so that it's not exposed. So, good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Cafecito. I see that my pie has rested. Let's cut into it. Let's see how it looks. Making sure that I am reaching the bottom of the plate. Lifted with confidence, because the pie is not the boss of you. You can see that the moment that I break the side, it really just wants to come out of the plate, which is great, because that is what we want. When I cut into my bottom pastry, it snapped. Like, it was solid, it wasn't soggy. I want to bite with Parmesan. It's really an unbeatable combination. The crunchy, buttery crust, the fresh fruit, the salty Parmesan. That's pie, that's summer pie for you. I wish that you find a really cool market that sells good products and then bake with them. That's what they're there for. Maybe you don't find strawberries and peaches, but maybe you find like, I don't know, rhubarb and raspberries. Maybe you find like strawberries and nectarines or raspberries and nectarines. I'm gonna try not to eat all of this pie at once. It's 8 a.m. for me. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you on the next one. Bye.